Alrighty, I think the waiting room is officially closed. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Tech Tuesday. Today, we are going to be talking about project management for academia with Cynthia Morell. She's part of our educational technologies group. She is a manager of compliance and performance, and she is going to be running you through an overview of how she does project management, which I will say from personal experience is really helpful and great. If you're new to Tech Tuesday, welcome. If this is your second, third, or however many times, welcome back. Just for everybody to be aware of, we do have everyone on mute because we are expecting quite a lot of people to sign in, and to avoid any background noises. You're on mute but can ask questions at any time just by typing them in the chat. If you've got maybe a more complicated question, feel free to hit the raise hand button and we'll try to get to your question as soon as we can and bring you off the mic so you can ask it. We're also recording today's session, so after the session is over, you'll be getting a follow-up email from me with a link to the video, as well as any helpful links that Cynthia mentions during her presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Cynthia. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So my name is Cynthia. I'm excited to be here today. We're going to go through a quick agenda, and I'm going to do my best to talk as quickly as possible through some of the theoretical things so we can jump into the practical things. So I'll be giving you a quick introduction about myself. Then we'll share some definitions about project management and the project life cycle, touch upon challenges of academia, which most of us on this call probably have experienced. We'll do some practical tips and tricks, and I'll be sharing some high-level tips that you can start using as soon as today. I'm hoping you walk away from this very brief session with things you can actually start to put into practice today. If we have time, we'll do a very brief exercise so you can see how some of this happens in real time. And of course, we'll make sure there's some room for questions. So a little bit about me, and I'll be coming off camera in just a moment so that I can just concentrate on the content. So I've got over 15 years of experience in project management and office operations, predominantly in the healthcare and higher ed industry and focusing in IT. I am a certified project manager and I am certified in ITIL. I think a cool fact about me is that I am a Cornell baby through and through. So I went to Cornell up in Ithaca, and I also completed one of the dual degree programs from Weill Cornell and the Johnson School of Business up in Ithaca, which is really exciting. As Vanessa said, I am part of the Educational Technologies Group team. We are called ETG or EdTech, and we've got a wealth of experience supporting the academic programs with a lot of their initiatives. Fun fact about me, I do love to dance. Haven't been doing it as much as I would like, but that is a fun fact. So let me get off camera so we can jump right in. Okay, so I think I ought to start with a disclaimer. There's a ton that goes into becoming a solid, experienced project manager, as many of you might expect. So by no means does this mean that after today's session, anyone's going to expect you to be a project manager. These are really tips and tricks for smaller programs and projects. Should you or someone on your team have a need for a large, complex implementation, I really encourage you to work with our Office of Service Portfolio Management. Here's their phone number and their email. We'll be sharing this after the session today. They've got a wealth of knowledge and can support you with large implementations. Now let's jump in. So what is project management? I think, it's this big concept and very theoretical, but really what it means, it is a framework that we use to really increase the success of projects. We organize things, we plan things, and we make sure everyone has what they need to be successful. There are a ton of different methodologies that you may have heard, you may have heard, Waterfall, Agile, and Scrum. For the purposes of today, we're going to kind of put all those to the side and just give you some nuggets to take with you that may fall under a number of different methodologies. As far as a project, by definition, a project is a temporary endeavor that you are embarking on to create something new, whether it's a product, a service, or just an outcome that you want. By definition, a project has a beginning and an end. Oftentimes this confuses people because sometimes you want project management for sort of an operational task. And while you can leverage some of the skills, to be clear, a project is intended to be a temporary endeavor. Yeah. An example of this might be, let's say you have an old technical system and it's just clunky, it's not working, but there's a brand new tool on the market and you want to implement that. You might embark on a project to do that. And what are some really important roles in the world of project management? I'm not going to read all of these because you're going to get the deck and you can sort of read into them. But I would imagine that for you, you're likely going to have the ones that I have bolded. You're going to have a project executive, someone who sort of makes the difficult decisions and provides guidance. You're going to have the project manager or project coordinator, which is probably going to be you, maybe a colleague, and you're going to be accountable for driving things forward, for planning, for organizing, for reporting, for making sure people have what they need to do their work. You'll likely have a subject matter expert, someone who has specialized in something that you're doing, if it's a nurse, for example, or a technical analyst. Okay. A brief moment to introduce those of you who have never heard of project management, or maybe some of you who have embarked in some of our other trainings. This is how we define the project management life cycle. So the first thing is you would identify a need, maybe there's a gap, there's a problem. Then you would plan for it, you hold planning sessions and kind of try to figure out how you're going to tackle the project. You might design it, you create a prototype perhaps, maybe you build it. You obviously have to do some testing. We got to make sure it works before you implement it and launch it. And last but not least, you cross your I's, dot your T's, or the other way around, and close the project. It's really important to leverage your resources, and there are a ton of resources out there, particularly for those of you who really want to further your skill set in project management. There's the PMBOK, which is for many PMs, sort of our go-to encyclopedia, so to speak. There's a ton of trainings available and books, and we'll be sharing some links to those as well. The Project Management Institute, wealth of information. You can find templates there, checklists, a bunch of stuff. And I think one that goes without saying is right here at home at Walt Cornell, you have access to a wealth of resources, whether it's your peers, your supervisors, or folks in other divisions who may have embarked in similar projects. Don't be afraid to ask them, hey, can you share a document with me? Or what did you learn when you did your program? Okay, so really important to really try to shy away from reinventing the wheel and leveraging existing resources. Now, what makes managing projects or getting work done in academia so challenging? I think we can all agree that there's never enough funding, right? Similar with staff, we have so much to do, not enough hours in the day, not enough resources, and it can get very overwhelming. Another important part is that we are an academic institution, which means we have students here, and we have semesters or courses, and these all happen in a finite amount of time. So if you really want to do your best for your students, you're kind of shortchanged. You've got to make sure you do the work before the semester starts, so to speak. And of course, our students are only here for either 2 years or 4 years. So we really try to, we want to do the best that we can while they're here. Then there are, of course, other regulations, such as either the National Institute of Health or the LCME. This also puts an impact on the way we do our work. And that's just to name a few. I'm pretty sure all of you on the call can share additional challenges. So now that I've said that, I want to take a moment to really revisit the project management lifestyle. And I kind of articulate why it's so different in academia. In the world of academia, as we just discussed, so much can happen at once. You might set out to do something one day and maybe you have a student crisis and that takes over. And so what we have learned is that truly project management in academia is an iterative process. I'm not suggesting that you change the scope of the project. Once you define what it is you set out to do and you have the goal, I'm not suggesting that every time you meet, you change that goal. Not at all. What I am suggesting is that you understand that there are going to be curveballs, and you might have to come back to the drawing board, and maybe negotiate and say, hey, if we don't have a third person to support us, we've got to either change the timeline, or maybe we don't need to do all of this just yet. Maybe not for this semester. Maybe we phase this out. And so this is what this is about. Periodically, as you're moving forward to drive your project, you may have to sort of twist and turn and work together so that you still keep your eye on the prize, where you do adjust to the curveballs that you may encounter. So it's truly an iterative process. Now I want to share some lessons learned from the many, I don't want to say many years, but from all the amazing work that we've been able to do together with the academic offices. One of the most important things that we like to, sort of share is that it's really important to distinguish between a true need and what's a nice to have. I would love a Mercedes-Benz, but sometimes what I really need is just 4 wheels on a vehicle, for example. You want to be transparent, right? You want to communicate clearly and articulate assumptions, because we all come from different walks of life. And so we want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to register the same information. Make sure we're on the same page. If you have a meeting, always have an agenda and make it reasonable. Don't have 10 things if it's a 20-minute meeting. I like to say 3. 3 is a magic number. 3 is sort of the meat. What are the 3 main things that you want to get out of a meeting, for example? Documentation is key. I think we all are concerned with overall burnt out and wellness. And one of the best ways to remove the monkey off your back, so to speak, is to make sure everything is documented. So you don't have to rely on your memory, or it isn't just one person that has access to information. So, and that speaks to transparency as well. When you are creating action items, you want to make sure that you assign it to a person and that you articulate a reasonable due date. Why? Because you want to have people accountable for transactions. If folks don't know when something is due, they won't be able to know when to prioritize it, for example. And if no one is assigned to an action item, everyone's going to assume, oh, not me, wasn't for me to do. So that's an example that's something that sounds really simple, but it's actually really important. Another thing is be flexible. I think the pandemic has taught us all that things happen. And, in the end, what matters is that we come together, we work together as a team and kind of brainstorm and figure out how can we move forward. The idea here is that we always have our missions in mind, and then we're moving forward. In line with being transparent, ITS offers you a wealth of technology that you can use to create transparency. OneDrive or Box. These are tools that allow you to collaborate with colleagues and allow them to kind of stay abreast of what's happening with your project, right? If you have a project folder and everyone has access to it, someone wants to work 10 o'clock at night, not that I'm recommending that, but that may be when you are more productive. Then you don't have to wait on anybody else. You can kind of go in and see what your action items are. 2 other important things are, one is people first, right? We are human beings first, and we all care about the work that we do. So let's treat each other that way and be prepared to have conversations about things rather than just kind of, getting a little aggressive. And another important one is, just because we do a lot of work doesn't mean we cannot have fun. In fact, since we are an academic institution, here's some data for you. Happy employees are up to 20% more productive than unhappy employees. So I can't stress that enough. When you are working on an endeavor, find a way to have fun, of course, respectfully, but have a way to have fun, allow people to get creative. Okay, so you might be thinking, Cynthia, that's all great in theory. I either heard all of that, but what do I do? Really, like today, how can I do this? What do I need? How do I get started? So while many of us may want Microsoft Project, a very fancy tool, the reality is you don't really need it, particularly when you're working on a small project or program. You can have a pencil or a pen. I personally love a whiteboard. I love Excel, and you can use Word as well. It's sort of your preference, the tech tools that allow you to create transparency later, electronic tools rather. I would say one of the most important things that you will need though is a calendar, right? Because you're going to want to take time to think about when certain milestones or tasks will get done and what might need to get done first. So here are the 6 high-level steps that I hope you can take home with you today. And I recommend this order, but it truly doesn't have to be in that order. If you're in the middle of a project or program and it's starting to get a little out of hand, that's okay. Take some time and try to introduce some of these things, right? The idea is to help you move forward, not necessarily start from scratch. So one of the first things that you want to do is define the scope. What is the real need? What's the goal of your project or program? Is it to travel from A to B, or is it to be in a fancy mobile, for example? You want to identify any major deadlines, right? You want to be cognizant. If you want to roll out a project and you need certain people, but there's a major event happening at the institution, well, they may not be available. So you have to be cognizant of any other major deadlines that could impact your own deadline. You want to be thoughtful about the team. Sometimes it's a very small project and maybe you don't have a huge team, that's okay. But you want to be thoughtful about who you can lean on, who's willing to work with you, even if it's just a little bit. And the opposite happens too. You don't want to invite 20 people to a project if they really aren't going to be completing a lot of the work, right? And this speaks to being efficient and flexible with everyone's timeline. You certainly want to make sure you know who's going to be making the key decisions and who's going to be the final approver. You want to know that early on so you don't create problems later on. I think one of the toughest ones, but the most important one, is taking the time to plan. Make a plan of attack for yourself. It doesn't have to be perfect and it can get enhanced, but before you would jump into anything, take some time to kind of jot down what are the things you might need. Who do you need? Who's going to be responsible for what? And by when? And have conversations with the people. Lean on the experts for their areas of expertise. The other thing that proves to be really important is having protected time to check in on what folks are doing, the status of the project, any rate limiting steps. And depending on how important or your timeline, you would decide whether you need bi-weekly meetings or weekly meetings or monthly meetings, and whether it's 30 minutes or an hour. I recommend, if you're starting, 30 minutes, right? Because the more time you give yourself, the more time you're going to use. You want to keep a pulse on everything, right? So if you're serving as a project manager, coordinator, it's sort of your role to keep a pulse on everything and make sure everyone has what they need. And when you hear that there is a showstopper, take the time to revisit the plan of attack and see where you can adjust and have conversations with the leaders around you that can help you. And always remember to try to have fun, even if it's just bringing small cookies to a meeting, for example. When your project or program is over, this is also a very important step that a lot of people kind of walk right over. Take a few moments with those who you worked with the most and talk about what went well, what could have done better. What do you wish you had had in place? These are all things that are going to continue to help you improve as you move forward. When possible, hold a tiny celebration. Give yourself and the folks credit because you put time and effort into something. And even if it was bumpy, you still got a lot done, right? You built new relationships, you improved something, you delivered something, you learned something, and that should be celebrated. So some of you might recognize a little bit the image on the left. These are images of real planning sessions that we have held at Weill Cornell. This one on the left is actually from the fishbowl, otherwise known as the collaboration room. And you'll see it's a whiteboard. We start sort of brainstorming the different things that have to get done, and we start using a calendar by when. It doesn't have to be picture perfect. The idea is you brainstorm and start committing things to paper. I love Post-its. I think most project managers love Post-its. When you use Post-its, it allows you to kind of move them around and visually see, oh, what things belong together, or what has to happen first. These are tools that you can use as you're planning projects and programs in your shop. Okay. Now, what do you do? Once you've done a little bit of planning, maybe you did it on your train ride home and you have it in your head, but you want to create it, you want to pull it together, right? In a format that's going to allow you to continue to add, make adjustments without making a mess of things. I alluded to this earlier, and I think a lot of project managers also love Excel. You can do this in a Word document as well. This is a very simple template or framework that you can use to help you track what it is that's going on in a project. Who are you waiting for? Give yourself some notes. In today's session, there's a lot more I can share. I'll give you a little snippet. Another reason why I do like worksheets, particularly for small projects, is because each worksheet can capture something else. So for example, if I'm in a meeting and there are action items, I can create another tab for just my action items. And I keep that a little separate. Same for team decisions. You can create a tab and you track all the team decisions. But at the end of the day, you have this overall project plan that serves as your plan of attack, your outline. So at any moment in time, if anyone asks you sort of where are things, where stands, what are we waiting for? You don't have to break your brain remembering. You can just say, oh, 1 second, open up your report, log into Box or OneDrive, wherever you are, and you can do a quick review of where things are. Okay, so I went through things really, really quickly because I wanted to try to give everyone a moment or two to see some of this happen in person. I don't know if we have any bold volunteers that brought any programs or projects that they might be working on that we can do a mini planning session. So I'm going to ask my colleagues, Vanessa, if she sees anything in the chat.
Not yet, but I'm giving it a minute to see if anybody has any questions even about maybe a project they're thinking about starting or in the middle of that we could potentially help with.
Okay, if we don't have any takers, I'm happy to do a quick show and tell of how I might do this in person.
Yeah, let's start with that. And maybe that'll spark some ideas in the chat.
Okay, so I'm going to
step out of the picture. Said, hi, I need to, hello, Raphael. I need to establish a chargeback model.
Ooh, a chargeback model. Okay, all right. So got to give me a hard one. Of course, it has to be one of my colleagues. Okay, so in this case, in a way, it's a service. So one of the things that we might do, and I'm going to delete some of the stuff that I have here because it may not be as relevant, but I just wanted you to see that the template is real and it always works. So one of the first things that I might do is really determine, for example, what are the services we offer, right? Is there a list? We need to know the services we offer. You may want to do some analysis, right? What does it cost to offer these services? So you can assign that to someone to do that sort of research. What are other teams charging? So again, knowing the lay of the land. That's an example. So at this point, we may start to realize, oh, I need to tap on so-and-so. I may need to have a meeting with, a couple of my peers to figure out what's going to work best. You want to maybe learn from maybe some of the DAs, for example. What has worked in the past? What have people not explained, or what have they explained well? Get any feedback before you sort of make a decision as to what's going to work for you. Good. All right. So since the people seems to have had it, we're gonna go a little bit forward. So for the person who recommended this, Are there any ideas that come to mind for what you have done so far? And that would be Raphael.
Raphael, I've also unmuted you if you want to add anything to.
Oh, thank you for that,
no
Vanessa. I
problem.
appreciate it. Yeah, I was just thinking that communication would be very critical in this sort of project, especially if maybe the service was, free at some point, and the change to a charge model might be like a surprise or just a new process for a lot of people. Then, communicating that very clearly.
Great. So coming up with a communication plan, absolutely. I think you may need to work with the finance team and figure out how long will it take to get the fees implemented for you, or creating a fund account, for example.
Right. I guess the details of the actual chargeback model, right? How will the payments be billed and then collected, processed?
Yeah,
all the technical details of that stuff.
Yes, exactly. So I'm gonna stop there because I think everyone, this gives you enough of how you start kind of lining things up, the things that have to do, and you can add, you can give yourself milestones. You can say, today is December 6th. By the end of December, I want to have done this legwork. And that way in January, I want to start putting together my preferred plan of attack. Yes, thank you. Someone said accounts payable. Yes, you may want to have a conversation with accounts payable. Thank you for someone who translate that. Good. Okay. Any last minute questions, comments, or concerns?
There was a question further up. Does anyone here have experience with creating an accounts payable system for clinical trials that are outside of the data entry system?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Is that something that we'd want to maybe take offline, Cynthia?
Yes, that's definitely something that's more finance related, rather than, I would say, project management. Have you already reached out to the AP or the finance office? I think that would be my recommendation.
Okay, Annette, how about I reach out to you after the session and we can get some more details from you to figure out how to route your questions to the right person. You are getting some comments in the chat that may be helpful in resolving the situation you might be experiencing right now.
Okay, so in the interest of time, we can have a few more questions, but I'm just going to recap a little bit of what we spoke about today, because I know we sort of covered a lot in a little bit of time. So I think the key takeaways from this session is, please take the time to brainstorm and make a plan of attack for yourself and your team. Think about establishing regular check-ins. You know your audience, you know your team best, so follow something that seems reasonable for your team. Try to create a central document, something that will help build transparency so everyone always has access to the right information at the right time. Assign tasks to your peers, make sure they know it's assigned to them, and talk about dates. Make sure it's included there so everyone knows how to prioritize their time. Remember, documentation can turn to be your BFF. Less stress on yourself when you document things, and if you have to be out of the office, your peers might be able to jump right in and keep, pushing the baton forward, so to speak. I know we all love to be fancy and fast, but we also always have to be flexible. And one of the benefits of keeping things simple is it allows more of your peers to be able to jump in and help you, because there's less complication surrounding the way you do things. And last but not least, always try to smile and have fun. It goes a long way. And just because we're doing a lot of work doesn't mean we can't have fun. I think Wall Cornell is a wonderful organization, and that's something that's always makes me smile. And I think we started getting questions already, but here are some resources. I really encourage everyone who's interested in project management to go to pmi.org. You can contact the Office of Special Services and Portfolio Management, We've got some awesome links for trainings here. Precipio used to be called Skillsoft, has a great path for project managers. eCornell has a wonderful project management certificate as well. And so without that, I want to thank everyone for joining today. Hopefully you got something out of it that you can use. If you've got any questions, last minute questions, I'm happy to answer a couple more.
But while we're waiting for some questions, we did get a great comment from Cindy. She had brought up a session we've done on Tech Tuesday in the past about using Excel for project management. So we'll also include in the follow-up email a link to that session if you're interested in watching it. If you have any questions, please feel free to, Semra, can you send the slide 22? Yes, Semra, we'll send all of those links to you via email after the session is over later today. You're getting a lot of thank yous, Cynthia.
You're welcome.
Fanny, yes, that the information will go to everybody who registered. So I have all of your emails. So if you're in today's session, we definitely have your email. Any other questions? I'll give it another few seconds before we wrap it up. Well, if you do end up having some questions while you're doing your own projects in your department or anything that you're planning, you know, when I send you the email information follow-up, you'll have our contact information as well, me and Cynthia. So feel free to just hit reply and, you know, let us know what's on your mind. Oh, Fanny might have a question really quick.
Yes.
Thank you, Cindy. PMO-training@med.cornell.edu is another. Oh, Fanny, let me unmute you so you can ask your question. All right, we have.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem. No, go ahead.
You or anyone have any tips for project or just managing, getting some projects done if you're in a NYP space as a Weill Cornell practice, navigating the two, you know, organizations, since it's kind of a gray line with who owns the space, who does what, any tips for that?
Oh boy, yes, that is something that we have to navigate as well, and it can be challenging. I think the best recommendation I can give you is, first is, have you been able to kind of find out one or two key persons in NYP that are responsive at all?
Depends on what we're talking about.
Okay. Yes, because I think what becomes very challenging with the NYP side is it's oftentimes hard to pinpoint who has jurisdiction, so to speak, who is the right person to communicate with.
Yeah.
And in this case, what we have found is that it becomes really important to kind of teamwork, create a team of sorts. So if you know the person, the counterpart of a role in of what would be an NYP, but you know it in Cornell, maybe talk to the person in Cornell, see if they know anyone or have done this with NYP, what has been successful for them. I think it's important to, if you have, let's say, an email thread of all of your attempts to get something done, I think it's important to be able to leverage that thread so that when you send a follow-up message, it becomes really clear that you've been doing your due diligence to get a hold of the right person, but it's not working. Sometimes you will have to just escalate it to someone who's, you know, sort of in a supervisory role to help point you in the right direction. But my heart goes out to you, because we definitely deal with that, and it can get very difficult. But once you find one or two people that are responsive on the NYP side, that all sometimes it's like the key you need to unlock that door. And it does take patience and persistence, I'll say that. But that's the best recommendation I can give you right now, without knowing more of the specific details or the arena that you need help, you know?
Sorry, Fanny, I'll unmute you. No problem. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, no, that's helpful. I guess, yeah, it would have to be discussed in more detail and to kind of get through, so you can kind of understand where,
Right. Or
yeah,
to
and
see.
we'd happy to talk offline, but yeah.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
helpful.
You know, I can tell you from an IT perspective, you know, we walk that line more often than we'd like, especially us working with students, for example.
Yeah.
And what is working, we have a wonderful team of liaisons, which is fantastic. They help sort of bridge that gap. They tend to know who could be a good resource for us to collaborate with on NYP. And sometimes what we do is we literally break down the process at Weill Cornell. And
Right.
then when we go to talk to someone at NYP, we say, okay, well, here's how we do it at Weill Cornell. How should this be done in NYP? Help me. You know, I'm not here to cause problem. I need to get this done. This is the rate limiting step. What do I have to do, or who do I have to speak to? If you're not the right person, can you help me?
Yeah.
Yes. And, you know, more than point me, can you connect me with that person?
Yeah.
Right. Oftentimes, you know, they have a better relationship amongst themselves. They know each other, right? And the other thing that happens, unfortunately, is they might point you in the right direction. That person may have left the institution, or they're not in the role anymore. And so, you know, and this covers a whole other topic that we, you know, in the world of project management do talk about, you know, stakeholder management and relationship building, because you just never know who's going to be the person that can lead you in the right direction. But I think if you foster 1 or 2 relationships on the NYP side, that can prove extremely valuable to you. Because they'll be able to tell you, oh, you know what? I think so-and-so did something like this. Let me see if I can introduce you.
Do you have any tips for getting Surface Pros for the clinic or cows or wows for here? That'd be great. Actually,
Oh, now that's a hard question. And now for that, I'm gonna have to send you, I think, our help desk in the Evergreen program. Have you been in touch with ITS?
Yep. Oh yeah. Yep.
Okay. And that's a little complicated.
There's no option for that.
Yeah, I personally love the Surface. I hear you. But when this one goes, I'm gonna have to say goodbye to Surface because, you know, we're gonna have to do our best. But yes, if you are ready with ITS, I'm sorry, I don't know that I can.
That's all right. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Good questions.
Thanks, Fanny. I don't see any other questions in the chat, and we're just about at time, so I'm going to start wrapping up the session. Thank you so much, Cynthia, for taking us through this overview of project management. Just a reminder to everybody, later on today, I'll be sending out a follow-up email with a link to this video, so you can go back and watch it again, as well as the links that Cynthia mentioned in her presentation and some that we found in the chat. Again, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to just reply. You'll have our contact information. And thank you so much for joining us for today's session. We really appreciate you taking some time to learn more about project management. Thanks, everyone.